fantastic crowd that we have today. I mean, you guys are all the way to the back of the room. I mean, I remember when we first started, we had everyone crowd up to the front, so it looked like it was tighter than it was. But man, now we are packed all the way to the back of the room. It's amazing. Before I start my speech in earnest, I want to just say a bit of a personal thing, which is that I've had a very bad year myself. I've gone through a health crisis and I had to have a rather extensive surgery on my back. It's okay, I'm on the road to recovery now. And usually when people have this kind of a crisis and they come back from it, they talk about how it was their personal struggles, like what they went through and how they persevered. But I'm not going to bother you with any of that crap. What I will say, though, is the one thing that I knew is that the party would still be here because of all of you. Because of the staff, because of the other Central Committee members, because of Tony, Stryker, Michael, Alan, Warren, all of you guys, all the staff, all of you still out there working, doing protests, doing activism while I was laid up. I could have been, crying in my cups and worrying about myself and my health, but I knew the party was persevering even while I was out of it for a couple of months. And for that, I'm grateful. Thank you. So it wasn't just about me, it was really about all of you and all of us together. So thank you all for everything you did. Now, let's get to it. So, many of you might have realized that there's a specter haunting America. The specter of wokeness. You've heard of this, right? We've all heard about this? Woke has become the watchword and the catchword of the day. It's everywhere in popular culture, in film, in media, in politics, and in advertising campaigns. It's gotten so bad, an entire movement has grown up to oppose it. The anti-woke movement. Republican presidential candidate Ron DeSantis is going to base his entire campaign on opposing the concept of woke. His wife was recently spotted at a campaign event wearing a jacket that said, "Florida, where woke goes to die." Even elements of the left have popped up to oppose woke. The so-called anti-woke left has arisen on the fringes of the urban hipster left. In recent years, cracking liberal consensus on such issues as vaccine mandates or possibly even opposing support for the Zelensky regime in Ukraine. While the anti-woke movement can point to individual examples of wokeness out of control, none of its self-appointed leaders can actually tell you in plain language what woke actually is. For most, it is simply a collection of anecdotes about stuff the left, you've heard about this, right? The left, you've heard about this group? Have you heard of these people? The left. Of stuff the left does that they don't like. This failure to identify what woke actually is best exemplified in a viral moment on the liberal YouTube show Rising, in which the host, Brianna Joy Gray, who's black, but I'll be honest, has nonetheless generally been a pretty fair interviewer, asked a very simple and basic question of her anti-woke guest, the Jewish author, Bethany Mandel. What is woke? Miss Mandel was rendered dumb by the question. She proceeded to blubber and stumble, and eventually spit out an incoherent string of words about hierarchies of oppression or something like that. If she had more time, she might have even regurgitated the phrase cultural Marxism, which is an outdated euphemism for exactly the same phenomena. Mandel later justified her stupefaction in a Newsweek column in which she explained that she was having a panic attack. Because apparently she had heard the host of Rising saying mean things about parents, and as a parent, she felt personally attacked in there and it was, I don't know, she couldn't talk or something. It's fake news. The reality is that she and other Jewish personalities that have put themselves out in front of the reaction to so-called wokeness know exactly what it is. But they refuse to define it in plain language because their job is not actually to oppose it, but to stupefy and distract ordinary people that understand intuitively that they are under attack, but lack the language and the ideological structure with which to fight back. Mandel's job is to make sure they continue to lack such language, which is why she prefers to allow herself to be humiliated by a simple question than to actually forthrightly define the thing she is pretending to oppose. So what actually is woke? I'm going to quote my friend and colleague Joseph Jordan here, who I think summed it up eloquently in his March 16th essay on the National Justice Party website titled, "What is Wokeism? How the Judeo-Right Retards Our National Conversation." Jordan defines woke in two parts. Part one, white Western nations, cultures, and peoples are fundamentally illegitimate due to the collective sin of the so-called Holocaust and other supposed historical atrocities related to white collectivism and to the exclusion of the other. Point two, an exception to the rule against collectivism for those who are racial minorities or who engage in paraphiliac sexual practices, who must be morally, politically empowered to rule over the white majority as a prerequisite to liberal democracy. This ideology has been the ruling worldview in the West for longer than the word woke has been used in everyday language. Referring to this ideology as woke is a relatively recent phenomena that has arisen since the election of Donald Trump, and particularly since the race riots and terror of the year 2020, the year of our Floyd. Now, on that topic, I'm going to take a brief diversion here. Let's have a hand of George Floyd for 3 years drug-free. Congrats to him on that. Congrats to him on that. Congratulations, George. In fact, we could go through some of the various euphemisms the conservative right and its Jewish handlers have used over the years for their supposed opposition. They've called it cultural Marxism, identity politics, social justice warriors, and even just the left. All of these are referencing basically the same thing. Ultimately, these two concepts outlined by Jordan serve as the ideological superstructure that justifies Jewish minority rule in the West and protects Jews from any criticism by their victims. The attack on the basic idea of white racial collectivism and even white categorization means that whites are forbidden from defining both themselves and their attackers in concrete terms, thereby neutering the available political options and responses to attacks on just ideas like communism or socialism or the left, these nebulous concepts, rather than these are the people who we are and these are the people attacking us. Now, this ends up making conservatives look ridiculous and impotent. It encourages mockery and disdain for them from their enemies, justifiably so. Meanwhile, non-white and sexual minority groups, Jews, blacks, homosexuals, transsexuals, are not only allowed, but encouraged by official ideology to collectively categorize both themselves, but also their white opposition, and to collectively seek power over white people. This framework is why the anti-woke commentariat is made up exclusively of Jews. Bethany Mandel, Eric Kaufman, Barry Weiss, Abigail Schreier, Zach Goldberg, Batya Ungar Sargon, Dave Rubin, Ben Shapiro, Abigail Shapiro, David Bernstein, Brett and Eric Weinstein, among others. Basically, the recurring cast of the Joe Rogan Show. The reason that these Jews who have used their collective tribal power to place themselves out in front of the reaction to wokeness refuse to actually define it is because they fundamentally agree with it. At least they agree with it so long as it strictly applies only to white people. A certain subset of anti-woke Jewry is preoccupied with the concern that woke libtards may become confused and accidentally apply the woke framework, which was reserved for white people only, to Jews and to the state of Israel and its treatment of the Palestinians, or that Jews will be mistaken for whites in racial struggle sections. A recent lawsuit by a group of Jewish students against the City University of New York, or CUNY, exemplifies this. These Jews were upset not that CUNY was teaching blatant racial hate in the classroom, encouraging non-white students to verbally attack and racially abuse white students, but that they, as Jews, had been misidentified by some blacks as being white. And that the protestations that they were not white were met with mockery. Classifying Jews as white, and therefore as legitimate targets of racial attack, was considered anti-Semitism. This was the basis of their lawsuit. I'm not joking. David L. Bernstein, previously mentioned, the president of the Jewish Institute for Liberal Values in Tel Aviv, has written a book on this very topic called Woke Anti-Semitism. Bernstein's goal with this book is to obfuscate the Jewish origins of the woke movement, but also to encourage his fellow Jews to work to marshal those whites that have risen up in opposition to ever-increasing anti-white attacks as a base of support for the state of Israel. The ultimate goal here is to recruit more white cannon fodder into the military to eventually fight against Syrians, Iranians, or Russians, or whoever in the interests of the Jewish state. This is also the goal of the Ron DeSantis campaign, which is one of the most Jewish endeavors in recent memory. As moderate liberal personality Michael Tracy put it in a recent tweet, pretending to quote Ron DeSantis, "You know what's going to stop wokeness, kids? That's right, Israel." While positioning himself as anti-woke, Ron DeSantis has nonetheless signed one of the most open attacks on the First Amendment rights of his own citizen under the guise of fighting anti-Semitism. Florida is not only where woke goes to die, but where free speech goes to die. To add insult to injury, DeSantis had the gall to sign this bill in Israel. This man who wants to be president of the United States sat there in a foreign country signing a bill restricting the rights of his American citizens, of us, of American citizens, of our birthright, as these Jews sat there rubbing their hands and cackling. Conservative personalities have mainly characterized woke as a market issue. It can be solved by individual choices in buying and selling. Boycotts of brands that feature transsexuals or of movies that engage in racial replacement, like the recent Little Mermaid film, are touted as solutions to the problem. Go woke, go broke is a slogan we've all heard repeated ad nauseum. The slogan furthers the anti-woke demand for political inaction on real issues by presenting passive refusal to consume product as a sufficient remedy for the categorical refusal of Jewish elites to allow white collective self-representation. The most notable recent example has been the boycott of Bud Light for their advertisement featuring Dylan Mulvaney, a male pervert that enjoys pretending to be a woman for sexual gratification. Bud Light congratulated Mulvaney on 1 year of publicly indulging his fetish with a custom can featuring his likeness. In reaction, conservatives have, for possibly the first time in years, staged a relatively successful boycott of the brand and have even compelled Anheuser-Busch, the parent company of Bud Light, to fire the executive behind the campaign. Anheuser-Busch even attempted to reconcile with those it had alienated by producing a new ad featuring a Harley Davidson themed can. If woke were purely a market phenomenon, and we as individuals could simply register our preferences with the corporate powers that be by buying or not buying, then conservatives should be encouraging everyone to go and buy these cans. After all, this is just about how corporations present their products to the public, and no other issues are at stake, right? Right? No. No. Another prominent recent example has been the backlash to the recent Little Mermaid movie. Anti-woke personalities are decrying the film for supposed woke casting, without ever mentioning what that is. It's simple. It's replacing classically white characters with non-white actors. It's the erasure of white people from our own history and our own folklore. But the anti-wokes won't tell you this. They prefer to hide behind the euphemism and pretend that your best option is simply to refuse to consume product. This point of view was summed up in a recent National Review column by, you guessed it, another Jew named Philip Klein. Klein argues that it's no big deal when corporations promote anti-whiteness or sexual paraphilia, and even if they market it to children, because they also sell things to conservatives. This is his argument. He defended the department store Kohl's for selling a pride-themed baby onesie because conservatives can buy baby onesies that say, "I cry less than Democrats." I mean, I'll grant that is pretty funny. All right, that's not bad. But, you know, that's not what this is all about. The market serves both sides. And after all, this is purely a market-based society, and the main concern of conservatives is the preservation of markets. Klein cautioned the anti-woke movement against becoming what they hate. In other words, against actually engaging in a meaningful, categorical opposition to their enemies. The one word you'll never hear any anti-woke personality say is, and what is it? You guys all know what it is. White. It's white. By refusing to even say the word white, the Jewish anti-woke movement perpetuates the effective ban on white collectivism. This is why it exists. The results of this ideology were demonstrated earlier this year, when the town of East Palestine, just a few miles from where we are, was hit by an environmental disaster. A toxic chemical spill had happened as a result of a train derailment in the middle of the town. Instead of standing up for the people of the town, who are overwhelmingly white, conservatives went into action to neuter any response to the crisis, lest it negatively affect Norfolk Southern stock or affect government budgets. Governor Mike DeWine has adamantly refused to declare a state of emergency, which would have meant federal funds would flow to the town, not just for cleanup, but to provide safe housing for residents. The residents of the town were denied any representation in the political process by the prohibition enforced by woke and anti-woke forces alike on white collective self-representation. Similar environmental crises that have hit black or other non-white areas have had swift attention and funding because these groups are allowed and even encouraged to engage in collective self-representation, and particularly when they blame whites for their problems. Now, we can expect that the GOP will do their best to protect corporate profits, but the refusal of any group other than the NJP to represent the actual people of East Palestine meant that they received only a pittance in aid and have now been rendered merely an afterthought by the political powers that be. NJP activism in East Palestine forced them to briefly change course, which shows the potential power of racial collective action. Congressman Bill Johnson, who was initially against any FEMA aid for the town, the day after he was confronted by Joe Jordan and NJP activists, issue a letter demanding such aid. Mike DeWine, worried about his image in the wake of the NJP protest, gave himself an extended window of time to declare a state of emergency. His plan was to simply wait out the pressure and count on the Jewish media to drop the issue. This is why the NJP must grow. We must become bigger and stronger so we can continually wage these campaigns month after month and year after year. Even as the woke left, which is also dominated by Jews, engages in open racial attacks and names their targets, white people, the anti-wokes refuse to name whites and will attack any whites that stand up for themselves on racial grounds more furiously than they'll attack the woke, the liberals, the left, or whatever you want to call it. This is just a rehash of standard conservatism. Categories are bad. Collectivism is bad. Collectivism is Nazism. The left are Nazis, and you don't want to be a Nazi, do you, white man? No. You want to be a beautiful loser. No! This is why the anti-woke movement is just as, if not more, anti-white than the woke movement. If we could simply brush these anti-woke Jews out of the way and actually meet the anti-white forces on the field of political battle, we would wipe them out. White collective self-representation would easily win the day. In all real conflicts, both sides tend to agree on the parameters of the fight. An army is necessary to fight an army. Yes. The anti-woke movement tells you the opposite. You fight those in power by attacking the concept of power, not by taking power yourself. You fight against overwhelming top-down cultural diktats by refusing to buy stuff. This is a weak loser mentality. And we've had enough of it. Now, we at the National Justice Party are willing to name our enemies and name their agenda, but more importantly, we're willing to name ourselves. We are white people, and we are sick and tired of political anti-whiteness and Jewish power, whether it takes on the mask of woke or anti-woke. We will sweep this entire fake debate aside and fight on the actual grounds that this fight is being waged. We're going to fight for white rights, for white survival, and ultimately for white power.